So this morning, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to someone who's going to give us an inspiring view from a different generation. Lecyca, who's over here, standing, waiting to come on stage, we discovered in many ways through the help of David Williams. Where's David? David, your Learn Fest was part of how we came about and found Lecyca. And Lecyca is a student, and she is also a consultant with the Whetstone Group, which is a foresight think tank looking at strategic foresight and thinking ahead. And many of us in large corporations have been spending a lot of time thinking about millennials, right? Can I have a raise of hands of how many of you have been wrestling with that problem? Lots, right? So Lecyca is going to be giving us a slightly different perspective. She's going to be talking about the generation following millennials. And I dare say, Lecyca, you're probably the youngest person here at Fred, and probably the youngest speaker we've had at Fred. Would you say that's so? More importantly, when Rocky met Lecyca, what he realized is that she is part of our tribe already. And we're so delighted to have you with us and to hear and learn from you. But what we know, we have a lot to impart to young leaders, and young leaders have equally as much to impart to us. Welcome, Lecyca.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for that. Oh, nice introduction. Thank you. I was spoiling something already. So I would like to start off by asking you guys a question first. Are there any millennials in the room? Millennials born between 1980 and 1995. Could you please stand up? All the millennials? 1980, 1995. So between 1980 and 1995. Are these all the millennials we have in the room? So millennials, I got some news for you guys. You are not the next generation anymore. Because Generation Z is the next generation. And I'm going to tell you why. So I've been doing research on the subject of Generation Z for about a year. And while I was going through all the rough material with my boss, Timon, he asked me to choose 3 main characteristics that describe my generation the best, in my opinion. So I chose 3, but he gave me one condition. And his condition was that he didn't want me to talk about Generation Z being digital native or tech savvy or something like that. Because we have been bombarded with millennial research that says that they are the tech savvy generation, they know everything about technology. And he wanted me to bring something new and fresh to the people here at Fred. So he said, not tech savvy, not digital native. So with that being said, let's go over to the first characteristic, which I spoiled already, which is tech-savvy-er, because, yes. I made this slightly rebellious decision against Timon because I think millennial research is just completely wrong. You guys are not that tech-savvy as you think you are, unfortunately. And here's why. This is the technological revolution that you guys grew up with. This was for you guys new and exciting. You probably recognize everything that's on there. But this is what you experienced during your childhood. And this is what Generation Z experienced in their childhood. This is what took place in their formative years, whereas for millennials, it took place in the later stages of their childhood. So that's the main key difference of the tech-savvier generation between Gen Z and millennials. So Generation Z are the real digital natives. And this is my cousin Alia. She lives in San Francisco, and I was living with her a few months ago. And this one day we went out for lunch, and while we were waiting for our food, we were having this conversation about ancient technology, the ancient technology that I just showed. And I showed her a picture of my very first cell phone. It was one of those flip-over phones. Did you have one too? Like, that was my first phone, and you had to press, it was with a keyboard actually on it, and you had to press 3 times to get to a certain letter. And I showed her this picture, and when I showed her that, she looked at me, and she said, "Whoa, I would never do something like that to my children." Yeah, so that was her reaction to my very first phone. And the other day, Alia came home from school, and I asked her how her day was. And she told me about this field trip that she made. And it was not a field trip to a museum or a zoo, which is quite normal for me. It was a field trip to the Apple store. Yes, Apple offers field trips to children in primary school. And they offer an inspiring collaboration and creativity with Apple products. Can you believe it? She had a field trip with Apple products. So things are obviously different for my generation. And this right here, this is our normal. We are growing up with in a world with augmented reality, which you see here on Snapchat, and for example, Pokemon Go, which was a huge trend. And digital assistants like Siri, that's super normal for us. And for millennials, it's new and exciting. Whereas we don't know any different. We don't know a world without touchscreens. And technology is super exciting and we love to use it. But on the flip side, there are also some negative effects. And Generation Z is completely aware of that. Because they realize that they are growing up in a world where hacking is not longer done by lone techies in a basement, but it's done by large entities, and it's the subject of a myriad of movies and even news headlines. We know that the hackers are out there, and we know the algorithms are out there too. We are completely aware of the fact that everything we post online lives there forever. So we are aware of our digital vulnerability. And that results in the end of an online openness that millennials had. Like millennials were posting a lot online, but Gen Z prefers the permanent, not the permanent, they prefer the temporary instead of the permanent. And that's why, for example, Snapchat is a huge trend. They prefer to use in 4D. And 4D, the fourth dimension, is time. Time is temporary, and on Snapchat, everything you post disappears after a few seconds. So we're actually posting the same amount as millennials, even more maybe, but we are posting it in 4D. That's the key difference. So if you don't understand Snapchat, Gen Z is happy to help. This is me and my boss at a conference in Sweden where I taught him how to use Snapchat. So yeah. This was the first effect of the real technological revolution. So 4D communication, privacy awareness. The second effect is that they prefer face-to-face communication. This is Alia again, and since the moment I left San Francisco, we never had a single phone call, like a real phone call. All she wants to do is FaceTime. So whenever I text her, she immediately FaceTimes me. And in fact, her text messages are never longer than only one sentence. She prefers to see me instead of only hearing me. And I kind of feel the same because I applied for a job at Hudson's Bay, which is a big retail startup. And they just opened a few big stores in the Netherlands. And what really struck me about my job application was that I had an on-demand interview even before they saw my resume. So they wanted to see me before they saw my resume and what I had done. And that's something I really like, and it makes it more personally, and I really think they totally get it. So face-to-face communication, and this also translates into research about Gen Z at the workplace, because they also want face-to-face communication at the workplace with you. They want to see you. And don't panic, they won't be hanging around in your office all day. FaceTime and Skype are also good, but they prefer a real conversation and they prefer to see you. And can I ask you a question? How many people in the room receive over 100 emails a day? Could you please raise your hand? Over 200? Oh my gosh. Well, the average amount of emails that people receive is 122 emails a day. And I was completely shocked by that fact. But this is absolutely not done for Generation Z because short messages and text are okay, but email is just too long for us. We want to see you in person. We really want to have the conversation with you. So this might mean the end of email. We might cause the end of email. So how does it sound? Yeah. So first, privacy. Second, face-to-face communication. And the third effect is the way we use our network. And the way we use our network at work, in fact. I'm going to explain this one with a story, which is a story of my uncle. He has this company in Amsterdam, and he was looking for an intern last year. So he had the job opening, and there were some requirements, and one of them well, one task of the job was to translate a press release from Spanish to Dutch and from Dutch to Spanish. So a few people applied, and there was this girl who was ticking all the boxes, so she got hired. And the first day when she got her, well, not the first day, but when she got her first press release, she was confident and she was on it, and my uncle trusted her. So the other day he was walking around at the office, he was doing his round, and he saw on her screen that she was doing something else. She was not working on the press release. So he looked at her and asked her, "What are you doing? Why are you not working on the press release?" And her answer was, "Well, I have a friend and he is fluent in Spanish, and he's working on it right now because he's helping me with it. And while he's doing that, I'm doing a little task for him." So yeah, managers in the room, how would you have responded to that? Like, that's what I asked my uncle too. I asked him, how did you respond as the boss? And he got mad. He got angry at her because that wasn't what he asked her to do. So her reaction to his reaction was, "Well, you'll have the press release on your desk in an hour. What's the problem?" And yeah, that's also a cultural thing that you can say, "What's the problem?" to your boss after 1 week. It's very Dutch. But yeah, is there a problem? Would you allow this behavior in your office? Or let me rephrase that. Would you encourage this behavior? Would you encourage Gen Z using their network at work? My boss always says the resume of the future has 3 pages. 2 pages with your own abilities, but the 3rd page is a page with the abilities and skills that you have access to, so with your network. So to wrap up the first characteristic, the millennials are an in-between generation, an in-between digital generation. And that's a good thing, because they can bridge the gap between the baby boomers and Gen Xers and Generation Z. So thank you for that, millennials. And second, Gen Z prefers digital face-to-face communication. They want to see you. They want to see you on Facebook, Skype, FaceTime. And so make sure that you give them the space to have a real conversation with you. And third, encourage them to use their network at work. Encourage them to look beyond their own abilities and make use of their network. So over to the next characteristic, which is entrepreneurial. Well, while doing my research, I also looked back to the period in which I grew up. And to explain this characteristic a bit more, we're going to look at this brilliant quote that I came across, which perfectly describes how I feel about the period in which I grew up. So read along with me. "We're too young to remember a world without problems. We didn't get to see the optimism, economic boom, and prowess of the 1990s. All we know is growing up in a world plagued by economic crashes, field wars, and an obsession with terrorism." So yeah, I completely feel this quote. This is how I experienced the period in which I grew up. And the key difference between the generations before us and our generation is that this bad news is something that we're constantly exposed to due to technology. So there's this 24/7 news stream that is always accessible. And according to psychologists, this results in prematurely world weariness. So Generation Z is prematurely world weary. And then the parents, because the parents are telling them, growing up in a world like this, your future might be the same, but it could also be worse. You might be poorer than me. So what they're teaching their children is to make conscious career and study choices. So they're saying to them, work hard and start now to think about your future. And this is typically a Western thing, but it kind of results in something very positive, because the word entrepreneurial pops up in almost every Gen Z research. There's this Harvard research which says that Gen Z is almost twice as entrepreneurial as the millennial generation. And they were already doing a pretty good job. And what they say is that Gen Z wants two things. They want to work hard and start young. So work hard and start young. And all the role models are out there. We see Malala, and there are tons of TED Talks of young people talking about what they're passionate about and what they're doing right now already in the professional field. And here's one of my favorites. This is Flynn McGarry. He's also referred to as a Justin Bieber of food. And let's hear what he has to say. It's a short video.
You need pepper. You need the shaved scallions for that.
On a daily basis, people ask me, like, why are you doing this now? Why don't you wait? And I always just respond to them, why don't I do it now? There's really nothing holding me back.
So they're asking him, why don't you do it now? Why don't you wait? Well, I totally agree with him, because why don't you do it now? He says there's nothing holding me back. And that's true. I think that's definitely true. And also, LinkedIn gets this, because LinkedIn used to have a minimum age of 18 years old. But 2 years ago, they lowered this minimum age. Is there anyone in the room that knows what the minimum age of LinkedIn is right now? 16? Anyone wants to guess? 10? Well, it's 13, which I think is already very young. So you can make a LinkedIn profile when you're 13. So what can you do as an organization when you know that Generation Z wants to work hard and start young? There's this one example of Abbott, a global healthcare company, which offers a 6-week summer program at their offices. So there's a 6-week program that you can follow as a teenager at their office. And I was also doing this talk at students of the Amsterdam International Fashion Institute, and that was a group of millennials, so it was quite intimidating for me, but how they reacted to this example was very interesting, because what they were saying was, why would you sacrifice 6 weeks of your holiday for an internship at an office? And for my generation, this is something we can imagine. I would do that, definitely. If it's a cool company, I would definitely do that. So, to wrap up the second characteristics, focus on the teens as well. Don't start when they finish university or college. Start in their teenage years already. And second, when you have the junior roles in your company, make sure that you give them an entrepreneurial twist already. So give them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial and to manage their own projects. The third characteristic of my generation is that we are raw. And this is especially in our identity. This is in the way we look at the world and the way we think to look, or the way we look at ourselves. So the way they look at ourselves and the way we look at the world is very different from the previous generations. We are striving for some kind of diversity, whereas, for example, some of the millennials are striving for conformity. It's all the same. And to visualize this, I'm going to show you a typical Instagram feed. This is what a typical Instagram feed looks like. And you see a lot of the same things. You see holiday pictures, a lot of food, filters, and it's all the same, and it all looks perfect. It looks too perfect for Generation Z. And there's this research which says that Instagram is ranked worse for young people's health. Instagram is too perfect. And they also say that Generation Z is generally against the idea of photoshopping. So they are against the idea of changing things about yourself in order to seem perfect for the world. So this is totally not done for my generation. This is not the real Kim Kardashian. This is the real Kim Kardashian. But you're doing this as well in your organizations and companies. You're Kim Kardashianizing your job openings. Everything looks perfect in a job opening. But JP Morgan Chase understands the rawness of my generation. They understand that you don't have to look perfect, just be honest. They had a job opening just a few years ago, and I'm going to read some lines from it. So what they say is, you care about disruption and have opinions on the future of banking. You have an opinion on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and you are probably ambivalent about the prospect of working for a large financial institution. So you're ambivalent about working there. And it even gets better. Sure, we are part of a large financial services firm operating in a highly regulated environment, and that means that we are not as flexible or agile as your average company, let alone startup. So what they're basically saying is, it's boring here, we know that it's boring, but we want you to work here. We still want you to work here. And yeah, to my generation, this is just a perfect job opening. It's a no-filter job opening. Well, that's the Photoshop part, but the real revolution in Gen Z's rawness is the way they look at gender. National Geographic calls it the gender revolution because Gen Z goes beyond gender binaries. Terms as gay, straight, or male and female are old-fashioned because in this world, in the world we live today, there are many more terms to choose from. So there's been a research which was done among baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Generation Z members, in which they asked them how many of the following terms they knew. So we're going to do a little quiz. And I would ask all of you to please stand up and count how many of the following terms you know. So I'm going to read them out loud for you. Aromantic, asexual, cisgender, demisexual, gender fluid, gender queer, gray sexual, non-binary, pansexual, transgender, and queer. So count how many you know. All set? Okay. Who in the room, please sit down if you know more than 11 or more than 8 terms. If you know more than 8, please sit down. Good job. Please sit down if you knew 7 terms. 6, 5, 4. Very honest, very honest. For the people still standing, there's some homework for you guys to do. Wikipedia. But the average amount that millennials knew of these terms was 4. And the average amount that Gen Z members knew was 7. And can you imagine being at such a young age and knowing 7 of these terms? I even didn't know them all. So if you know that they want this diversity, look at your board. Is your board ready for the next raw generation? Or does it look like this? This is not what we want to see. This is not a board that we would like to work for. Like, this is not a stock photo. It's a real Canadian company. I'm not going to say their names, but they all look the same. And they all have the same tailor. The only diversity that they have is the man with the glasses. So this is not what we want, but it is possible. This is Trudeau's cabinet in 2015. And when he was elected in 2015, he presented his cabinet. And a journalist asked him, why 50% women in your cabinet, Mr. Trudeau? So what his answer is, well, because it's 2015. Next question. So it's possible, and we can learn a lot from him. To wrap up this part is consider how if your organization has a Trudeau diversity. Are you ready for the raw next generation? So wrapping up, are you ready for the technological, tech-savvy-er generation? Have digital face-to-face communication with the Gen Z members in your organization. And you make sure that you encourage them to use their network at work. Give them the space to do that. Second, give them work experience and entrepreneurial roles at a young age. So start young and make sure that they can work hard. Give them the responsibility that they want. And third, is your organization Trudeau enough for Generation Z? Well, thank you so much for listening. This was the first time actually doing my talk all by myself, so it was quite exciting. I was quite nervous, but you were a lovely audience. And I look forward to have some face-to-face communication with you. And thank you for listening. And if there's some feedback, please don't hesitate to approach me. I really want to hear everything you say. Is there something?
Lecyca, we have a few minutes for some questions.
Oh, for some questions, definitely. Yeah, of course.
Can
we applaud first?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Sue. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
I have a question about point number 2. For the people on my team who are probably in between Gen Z and millennial, I absolutely need my team around the country to be entrepreneurial. So tell me about what this generation wants, in addition to FaceTime, right? But tell me what this generation would like from their managers, right, in terms of coaching, direction, etc. And tell me about the management style they like to work with.
Well, I can only speak from my point of view and my experience, since I haven't even started college yet, so I'm still very young. But what I've experienced, especially with working for Whetstone and with my boss right now, I really like to have the responsibility and to be just thrown into the deep. Like what he did was just do research and then get back to me. And he didn't give me any restrictions whatsoever. So I really like to have freedom, and I think that's the key thing, or the main thing that you can do. Give them the freedom, but give them also the responsibility. And make sure that they know what the consequences are if they don't follow up to that responsibility. That's my experience.
Hi, my name's Hamish Wilson. Thank you so much. We heard some fascinating thoughts from Alison from CNN yesterday, and her frustration with this era of social media and fake and false news. And I'd be really fascinated to learn from you what Gen Z thinks about fake news, and whether or not you're optimistic about Gen Z's ability to navigate a way beyond fake news.
Yeah. Well, I think growing up in a world with so much technology and fake news being a thing, like it's a thing for us, fake news exists. And I don't know how it was with the previous generations, but it's really present in our world right now. And what they say about Gen Z is that we are a very realistic generation. So I think we can easier put things into context and we know how to find our resources. So we know where to go for real news and how to create a certain narrative which is not fake. So I think because we are digital native, we know how to deal with it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, tell us where to find it.
So that gives me some cause for optimism. Alison was not optimistic yesterday.
No.
So what I'm taking from this is that I should feel optimistic in the generation beyond the millennials and your capacity to find a way through to some more honest, more real narrative and agenda.
I think you should feel optimistic, but we don't feel optimistic. And that's why you should feel optimistic, because we're not optimistic, we are realistic, and we know that there is some work to do, and we want to change the world. And that's what I said about the role models. They want to make a difference. And that's what you see among my generation a lot, people wanting to make a difference and starting young already. So they really want to make a change, and I really think that there's a next generation of change makers coming.
Well, thank you. I think you gave a fantastic presentation, so thank you so much. And I will say for me, with face-to-face, you've actually redefined that because us older people, I guess, would say that is in person, face-to-face. But the way you just described it is, you know, it is FaceTime, it is Skype, all of that. So that's fascinating. And to that, sometimes us older ones have, you know, I was just talking to my mom the other day, and she's, you know, well, how are they working out relational skills and, you know, conflict stuff and all of these questions, right, when she thinks of her grandchildren and stuff who are Gen Z. So do you think that's part of why you want to be face-to-face? Is it's that whole relational component and how you're working out your own relational dynamics? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's kind of because technology has been there for a while right now. It's still very young, but with FaceTime it's changing, and I think that's true because you can see true expressions, and I always say WhatsApp is just, well, in Dutch I know how to say it, but right now I don't. It's just it's very static. It's not, you don't know the feelings behind or the intentions behind a message because you only see some letters and not a face behind it. So I think that's true, that you give another definition on having face-to-face communication by FaceTime and Skype. Sorry, I lost the... Yeah, that's actually also something that we are still finding out as a generation, because what you also read a lot is that it might be the case that this communication that we're having right now, we're more global, we're more connected to the world around us, but we're also less connected because we're only connected through our screens. And in some researchers say that this results in a more depressed generation. But I think, in my opinion, we should really wait for the effects that are coming with it. I don't think you can already conclude, well, have a real opinion about that because it's so different and we're still developing that. The youngest, well, the oldest of Generation Z are 18. I'm right in the middle of millennials and Generation Z. And right now, relationships are changing, but how they are changing in the later stages of their life, that I don't know, to be honest. How do you know? How do you think it will change? Yeah.
I don't know. There's lots of great insight I'm sure in this room, but I would think that knowing that you're looking for that kind of facial interaction and wanting to see each other, like you said, wanting to see the expressions, I think that's a very positive thing because you can have more heart-to-heart conversations probably that way compared to just the texting, right? So I would think that's encouraging and actually should diminish people's concerns about how do you work through disagreements or conflicts or you know what I'm saying? So I think that's actually a very positive step and great to hear you talk about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I have time for 2 more questions. I'll go over here. Hold on a second.
Do you want me to speak? Oh, it's over there.
Thank you so much. It has been really helpful.
You're welcome.
I was saying not only it's helping us as human resource professional to foresee what is coming, but also it helps me as father because it helps me to understand my son when he's 11 and asking me he wants to do internship, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
So why not? And he got frustrated, and honestly, I have to call him to apologize to him because I understand now what you are saying. So it's really helpful. Now, my question is about, okay, how do you guys feel overprotected sometimes? How do you think this will change the concept of child protection, child labor, child work, and the organizations who are trying to protect children? They may need to change their policies, just like LinkedIn did. I've seen Google hiring this Tom, what is his name, from India. 15 years old, and I was shocked about that. He's very smart, but I was shocked about it. But now, actually, your presentation helped me to understand a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we changed the way I will work as a human resource professional.
Yeah.
So the question about protection, if I want to hear your view, your opinion, how do you view it, see it as a Gen Z? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, first of all. Yet again, I don't think I'm already in a position to tell organizations how to structure their company, but I think I had this question earlier at the Fashion Institute too, and they were saying there are so many burnouts right now, and when you're starting young, you're more likely to have a burnout and to, I think that definitions are changing right now because work is not anymore a 9-to-5 job for my generation. For example, my boss, Timon, always texts me. Once a week I go to Amsterdam, which is 2 hours traveling, and he always texts me, hey, do you want to come earlier this morning because we're going for a swim. So we're swimming in the morning, and then we start working. And then during work, we also do other things. There are some exhibitions in the office that we work. So it's not only work, it's also things that come with it. And I think you should change the environment. Yesterday we were visiting, if there's anyone that can help me with the name, we were visiting the innovation, Center of Social Innovation. And I really felt at home at that place because they were talking about the meetings that they have. They had weekly salad meetings where they just, it was a place where a lot of companies were had their offices, and where during those meetings they just engaged with each other and could communicate, and the place really looked like home. It felt like home to me. So you should really create an environment that is not that is not a boring office. Make it more fun to work, and that's how you should protect the younger generation, in my belief. Yeah, was that it? Thank you so much again. Thank you.